What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Mist Podcast. I am your host, Aeromist, and today we're going to talk about community. I think it's been an idea that's always existed with humanity in general, but the idea of how community implements into society, what it is, and how we use it today, and how it's actually come to hurt us as humans to not understand community is huge, and it's a very important big conversation, because back in the day, we'll go back to 100 years ago, community was, you grew cucumbers, the person on the other corner grew potatoes, the person down the street rose chickens, the farmer down the road would do cows, and everyone would come together at one place, and you all would exchange food, and that's pretty much where you would keep it. Now that brought a different problem in. Like, capitalism solved a different problem that has always been in human civilization for us having community, right? Which is this one problem where if I'm the person that grows cucumbers and I go to the person that has chickens and I'm going to say, well, my 20 cucumbers are going to be equal to your one chicken. And the dude with chickens is going to be like, but chickens are more valuable than your cucumbers. So instead, you're going to give me 50 cucumbers and I'm going to give you one chicken. And then you start having this, right? Then you start having a whole different problem. And that's just about capitalism. We'll talk about capitalism later in a way different video. But pertaining to how the idea of community has been here is now coming across where, if you go back deeper and deeper away from our technology currently, we have always been more communically integrated than we ever have. And the modern day part of like how we've been able to have community is much more of a reference, which is why I talk about that, because capitalistic means in the middle has also been a part of what has made us lose community, right? And it's important to understand that, because when we hit today's world, I no longer have to go to talk to other people in my local community about getting food. I can go to Walmart. I can go to a store, which now is actually becoming more detrimental, and it's way better for me to go to those local people. And now we're having to some way find and refine all the community we needed to have and have always kind of had, right? Because there's people that do grow food and they raise chickens and they do all that stuff, but then they throw it into capitalism and the corporate capitalism, and they're living out of that rather than going into their local community. And that's where farmers markets come into play, of like finding it locally is what I mean. But a lot of those companies, or I say companies, a lot of those individual people, if they have small businesses, also take how they can bring those not just to farmers markets, because like if you don't live in a very big city or a big town like me, for instance, then your farmers market is only 2 days a week, and on those 2 days you only have about 4 hours in those days to go to the farmers market. That's not enough for all these people to make a living. So they're obviously either having other things they do, or they have a part of their selling these things they grow to some of the corporate side of it. Like, for instance, my local Walmart keeps local honey inside of the store next to all the other stuff that they get. They get their watermelons locally, but I know that they get their trucks in for their strawberries, for instance. Like, you can tell some of the stuff that's actually local inside of the corporate store and some of it that is not. Now, depending on where you go in the bigger city you get, that's why you have farmers markets that are, almost open like Walmart is because there's so many people, and they know that all the stuff there is, like at Walmart, is getting shipped in, and some of it may be local. But if the farmers market is now like the community saying, here's all of our stuff, forget the corporate, like now you can find your community. But the imposed part of corporate and the corporation, the capitalism, the grand scheme of no longer needing your, not even needing to know who your like left and right neighbor is, whether that's in an apartment complex or that's in a literal physical building of like a home, and everyone has their own homes. Like, if you don't know your community, then that can be very detrimental to you, because like, and this is not even necessarily like the strong survive over the weak, but it's like we cannot win without each other. no matter what happens, we are not able to thrive as an entire species without one another. There's no way around that. And that's the only reason we've gotten to where we're at. Even if a business in themselves want to get things done, they have to pay the resources, meaning they have to pay the community of people that are involved in all these different sectors to make their stuff happen. So, and that you could say is a part of supporting a type of community, but it's not the same way as like what community is today, and why the idea of that has somewhat been lost, but is refound in ways the internet has provided us, which is why you find different niche community-based things on the internet. You have gaming, you have, you could say specific type of interest where people find their community, but those communities aren't exactly communities that are imposed upon helping you or me survive. They're just based on a collective point of interest. And maybe that's the whole point of why community itself has kind of been lost, is because the collective point of interest is not the same amongst most people. When we go back to a point of understanding that the reason why we were trading food around to each other was the collective point of interest was letting us know that we had to do this so that we could survive, and we all were trying to survive together, and that's it. And so like if we're all just trying to be human, then we can empathetically sit in a point where, we can trade goods without any problems. I mean, to some degree. But with capitalism in the middle, then like, your point of goods become a different means, but everyone still can make it realistic. And that's kind of the point now, is like, we could go back to that. We could fully go back into this world of community. And most of us did not grow up around community, so we need to understand that vision. Because if you want to do anything and accomplish any goal in your life right now, if you don't have community around you, good luck. There's just no way that you're not going to have some form of community around you to do it. Even if it's like something you can do all by yourself because of AI, you can be a one-man entrepreneur, you can go learn all this stuff. Well, who are you learning from? You're going to learn from someone that teaches you. You're going to learn from a community of people that have questions that you might have already answered right there when you go to them. So one way or another, you're still going to be relying on community. There's really no way around that. And even then, you could still figure all of it out. You could do it all yourself, whatever. But now there's one part of what you have completely missed, which is the things that matter the most, and the reliance in the materialistic point of like, well, okay, well, do we want to live a collective happy life or a collective not so happy life? And I mean, a good reference is that like when we experience things all on our own and we've walked through all these things, it's like we're still going to at some point reach out to have community, to have experiences with people, and that is still a part of you being able to live psychologically in a place of happiness and peace. If you didn't have your community, even if it's only the two other people on this entire planet you would ever call, and that's just how it is for the rest of your, that's still your community. And if something happened, those would still be the people you would call. If you hit a bump in the road, you start having some really rough stuff going on. Like, and if you didn't rely on them, then if one thing happens where your world falls apart, that's it. And so in any case that we are literally people that have survival instincts, and when it comes to thinking about how we're going to survive, no matter what it is that you want to do with the successfulness and accomplishment that you could find, it's still going to take people that see your vision, that support you. And by that meaning that you have to have people that is a roundabout of community. That's why individual people have their communities, like, brands and artists, musical artists, digital artists, or, anybody that has to have people that enjoy what they already are doing or creating, and then formatting that right back into a way that lets that person live. And then those people are seeing the value in, there's an exchange. And that exchange now has changed, but I think we're getting back to a point slowly where we're reestablishing that exchange in a different means because of money. And capitalism is now, it's stripped us from the initial part, but excelled us into this area where, like, if I'm on the internet and I'm just in a community of people and I need help, then, I could ask those people for help before I start having to, like, really go to extreme lengths with my own existence. And that just can be because I've provided some value there. I've met some homies, like, whatever. But at the end of the day, if we're not having this constant Like, energy is always in its exchange. And no matter what, because you live as an energetic entity, you always live in the essence of exchange and exchanging your energy. And unfortunately, or I say not even unfortunately, fortunately, your exchange of energy with other human beings and your reliance upon building a broader spectrum of consciousness to sit underneath with two pinnacles of light rather than one begins to envelop and prose a world that's much different than everyone relying only on themselves and thinking it's like, lone wolf status out here. That's never going to be realistic for humans. Now, maybe at the point where we're no longer humans, right? When you're a cyborg, and technically we're kind of living in a cyborgic world already, right? Your phone. If you didn't have that, then what are you going to do? Most people wouldn't even be able to live if they didn't have the internet, right? Because of how much physical world has changed over to things being able to be done from the internet. And then you think about where robots are going to go to replace regular people. It's like inevitably we're going to come back to this point anyway, where if we don't establish community from person to person, then we're going to have an impossible time trying to accomplish goals, because there's no way you can accomplish goals if no one has a meeting place anymore. And people used to do this back in the day too. Everyone would go meet at the town hall, or everyone would go meet at the library, or, like people would find ways in their local community to still have the community. And that's part of why a lot of them thrived and some of them fell apart, even having that. And some places got toxic. And I feel like every single line of community, because most of us are only a product of what we have been given, and we're not growing up around community. Especially if you're around my age, your mid-20s, or younger than that at all, then you did not grow up in a time where community actually mattered at all to your existence, because we grew up in the age of the internet. And so if you needed emotional reliance, or you needed any of these other things, then it's like, at least now you can go try to find internet friends, and you can try to, you could figure some things out. But when you're limited, it's almost just like you're boxed into your own existence of just thinking or living, or whatever that might be, thinking about a time before we had all of this in front of us. And that's kind of the point now, is that, well, community and the idea of it has to shift in a more practical manner that lets us thrive better than we ever have. And that's why the needs of us as people has changed, but the means of community has changed. But there's one foundational point to community that will never diminish, that will never go away, and that will always exist, and that is your human to human connection. The experience you have of connecting to other people is almost an ingrained part of every single person's existence, because the foundational lie of you even coming into this world is that you have to rely on somebody to be able to even survive being in these stages of your life where you have no power, no control, where you have nothing but the mercy of somebody else feeding you, changing you, and whatever else goes along with you having to live. So, and that is just a constant fractal overflow of how we are already structurally designed coming into this world. And so you just can't go against how you are structured. You can't go against how you are designed, because at the subconscious level, there are parts of our design that are always going to be rotating no matter what we do. And they're just a part of what makes us, our unconscious systems, your autonomic nervous system, the parts of your body that are fluctuating and doing things and interacting. And it's just like this cut on my finger has over time grown new cells. It's done all this, whatever, it's been healing. And the body is healing itself. I'm not sitting here, and I could sit here and focus my attention and my energy on trying to just heal it, but it's like it's already enacting its own energetic presence without me ever having to be fully conscious of what's supposed to happen. And I say what's supposed to happen, but what is necessary for the attempted concrete goal that is ingrained into how I function. And the functionality of a human is around still that basis that you have to survive, meaning it has to have certain goals it accomplishes when there are other things that happen to it. So that means that that's still a fractalization of your existence on a broader scheme, that when you live in this world as a human, there's no way to get around having to have community, to invest in community, to build some form of that around you. And if you don't understand that, then just understand building connections with people and finding a positive connection, right? Because if it's a toxic connection and you surround yourself with people that aren't good for you, then you're not even surrounded by an accurate point of community, because they're not going to help you. And the point is not like who could help me, but it's supposed to be, how can we all have an exchange of energy that uplifts all of us at the same time? And sometimes at your lowest, when you're asking for help and you don't have hardly anything to give, well, remember that value is represented in so many other ways, like the effort that you give to people, the attempt, the energy, the time, like that does not always have the same representational value as other things. And so you have to remember to stick by understanding community is not what most people have been brought up to believe that it is or have lived out as it is. It's just not the same. So sometimes we have to unlearn and learn things again, and this is something that I'm going to talk about in probably the next podcast, or the next episode is going to be about learning and unlearning things, because we need to unlearn the ideas we have of sometimes not just community, but love and care and kindness and emotions and interacting with people and all these other things. Because if we've only been taught to a specific line, remember we were at the communal mercy of other people for so long in our life, then there does come a time where you still have to take it on yourself for what you have to do for yourself, but then also accommodating that same thing right next to saying, I know what I have to do for myself, and I know what I have to do with my community, or with building a community, or involving myself in a community. Because if you don't have it, you're still going to be bored. You're not going to be satisfied. And I think the whole point of how community is supposed to be driven as an ideology anyway is that it is a constant rise of a balance, that if I'm lifting other people up with whatever I put out, then they're also going to be doing the same thing for me, and that's how that exchange works. So you can either go one of two ways, and it may seem like life isn't black and white in many different areas, but one thing that seems very hard for me to conceptualize away from thinking it's in a black and white stance when it comes to all this is like creation or destruction, uplifting or downgrading. And maybe that is a misconception of the constant flow of how things will go, that there's just the roller coaster. Oh, well, that's what it would be, is the wave form. There's always a wave form, right? Because everything's energy and everything is vibration. And if vibration is always the constant emission of a waveform, then that's what the presence of the duality would be, is that we're also living in a constant form of formation and vibration. So you have to have some form of that. But I don't think that means the bottom and end peak have to be layered underneath black and white, because you could live in, practical optimism and other types of things. And so I think that that's just a broad spectrum of saying that, like, remember, your existence is still a part of you understanding the concrete flow of energy and energy's exchange, because you have energy that you give out, that you put out, that goes into the things that you do. You exist as energy, and it moves no matter what. So from a community standpoint and understanding community in general, that is nothing but a constant overturn of helping everyone because you helped yourself. And then once, when you live in a higher vibrational sense, and that's probably why community has been so broken, is that many live in a low vibrational place because of the subdues and the constrictions of what 90% of us were brought up on, the lies that were told to us through our food and through medicine and through everything else, from the lies of the sociology, the psychology, the emotional intelligence, that the individual people that could have raised you were trying to teach you about, but they were just as uneducated as the other people that could have educated them right. And just this long line of, like, if you don't figure it out and it doesn't make sense to you, then, it's not going to make sense anywhere else. But there's still a line of, like, what you align yourself with, because you're going to connect yourself some way or another. There's always connections between you and things in the world, because you're kind of like how your body works. Your brain's making connections to make other things happen. It's almost like when we talk about fractals. That's an episode that you should definitely go check out. An episode I talked about where your existence is an existence of fractals and fractalization within its own, within everything that you do. And this is another important aspect when it comes to talking about community, that we just have to make sure that we remember what community actually is and what it's about. And that if we feel like we don't even have the ability to have overflow energy to give to people, like, the dripping excess droplets on the bottom of the entire cup, the things that no one has to take and empty your cup about, right? That's the whole idea of people with love and kindness is that the love or the kindness, if you are not keeping yourself at a full cup where you are not necessarily unreliant, but reliant only on thyself as a pinnacle to be able to overflow energy to other people in a very productive manner, then you can't contribute productivity to a community anyways, because you would either be helping or hurting that community. And if you're not helping the community by having a good energetic input, then you're taking from that community and you're stripping it. And that's what we have to understand, just not just with value, but with like what you give is what's going to come back to you. And if you cannot be truthful in understanding like what real value is when you're giving it, then you're not going to get the real value back that you think that's supposed to be there if it's going to happen. And then also not even living out of the pros of expectation, because the community really doesn't owe you anything, just like you don't owe the community anything. But this is kind of just like you get what you put in no matter what you do in this world. And that's just, everything is an energetic exchange, and you will always exchange energy. So the thoughts that you have, the actions you do, the imposal of your own existence inside of this world, and however you as a human being end up doing so is going to still have that focal point that you're exchanging energy from you to whatever else. And no one can escape that. That's from a broad point, but also down to like a scientific fundamental point of like just energy and how energy is fluctuating and working throughout this entire universe. So community is very, very important. I myself have started and really had to come back into the idea of understanding community and all the areas of it, because I was not grown up around the most positive sense of community. And so even if I'm still going to exist in different parts of the community I grew up around and those people, then I've just had to understand how to positively be involved, even if it's at a distance or it's not at a distance, or, knowing how I really contribute to this or I don't. And I think that's an important part of everybody getting on the same page. And in a world where emotional intelligence has become very difficult for people to accurately pick up on and then depict and then go from that and then have a flourishing part of communication, when communication is a part of the backbone of having an accurate goal set by a community to achieve, then remember, ideas are only just as good as the communication of the ideas. If you can't get it out to be accurately represented, the idea is hard for people to get behind. Thus, building accurate community is almost impossible, etc. This has been my talk about community. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to check me out on all socials, aeromis.xyz, if you want to get the direct link. And I'm going to be dropping some NFTs very soon in the future. I might have already dropped them by the time this comes out, or not, I don't know. But by then, either way, go check it out, because we got some cool stuff going on. And I will catch y'all on the next one.